Hey there, it's Tyson. I just wanted to hop on here real quick before we dive into the interview because the topic we're talking about is receiving. And you're going to hear how Jamie and I just know that at the core of many of the problems in our own personal lives and in society at large is our inability to receive and to be able to connect with God in a meaningful way. And so I just wanted to highlight first off that if you want to develop this skill, because it is a skill, then you can go to what I call the receive experience. This is a call that I do every single morning to help people learn how to better receive and connect with God so that you're not stuck in the shame and in fear that's stopping you from living out your inherent identity, the identity that God wants to tell you about and help you to live out. So if you are interested, I'm going to put a link in the show notes in the description. You'll also have links to some of Jamie Winship stuff that I just love. And so make sure you check that out after you listen to this because I just want to be able to pray with you, like guide you in being able to learn this skill. Because if I can guide you, and this is all for free, if I can guide you, then I know that your life will change. It's transformed my life, it's transformed so many other people's lives. And this mission that I have is just so compelling to me. And I just want to get as many of you being able to truly hear from God and moving in a direction that's inspired and innovative and creative and life-giving. Because if you can do this and I will pray with you, like you can come to these calls and I will be with you and we can have a moment where I can teach you things and help you uncover some of the things that may be blocking you. You're going to learn some things that might be blocking you in this interview, but I can help you deeper, further. And so I just wanted to say that up front because I know this is powerful. I know it can change your life. And without further ado, let's just get into the podcast and get into the interview. Welcome to the Inherent Identity Podcast, where we help you learn how to hear God clearly, break free from fear and shame, and live with confidence in your inherent God-given identity. Whether you're seeking clarity, courage, or connection, this is the place where you'll find the guidance to hear God and take bold action on what He's inviting you into. Let's dive in. All right, everybody, welcome to the Inherent Identity Podcast. And today I have a very special friend, and he's just a dear mentor of mine. I love him a lot, actually. And he's done a lot for me personally in just teaching me how to connect with God in a deeper way. I don't know what else to really tell about him because if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably heard others of his. But he's an author. He's a coach. He's someone that follows Christ more than many other people that I've met. So, Jamie, I want to talk about how to receive because I think it's one of the most important things. I don't know where you might begin on this subject, but let's talk about this.
Well, I can tell you, I think I'm glad you're exploring this concept of receiving. I mean, I haven't ever read anything good on this as a specific topic, so we need to explore it and to understand it, what it means to receive. And when I think about it, because I was a police officer and got recruited by the State Department and all that in my former career and now part of my career, I would say, and I'll say this is because I was talking to a police department in Texas last week, just working on some stuff about identity in the police department and with public schools. And what I was saying to them was, if I was an enemy to a country or a civilization, what you want to do is take away any kind of nobility that's committed to acts of public service. So in a culture, what you want to do to really ruin that culture is to make public service unimportant and low paying, and to make the goal of making as much money as you can the highest goal of the society. And this makes every empire fall. There's a turning point in the rise of every empire is when they exchange public service for high paying jobs that the culture begins to collapse. And so in talking to them, in that whole concept, what really causes the move away from a life of serving and protecting others, an other focused life, what
Yeah.
moves away from making that noble is the loss of the ability to receive from God. I mean, that's
Mm.
basically where that begins to fall apart. Because if I believe that I can receive from God, then what I'm going to receive from God is the example of an other focused, self-emptying, unconditional love lifestyle. That's what I'm going to receive from God. If I receive that from God, then when I look towards my community, it's not going to be how much money can I make, in a
Mm.
separation scarcity worldview. It's going to be how can I connect at the deepest level with my fellow human and serve them. That's what you're going to receive from God. If you stop receiving from God, you're going to develop a separation mentality because you're disconnected from God, which causes you to disconnect actually from yourself, and you're going to turn towards self-protection and self-promotion.
Mhm.
That's where you're going to end up. And when you move towards self-protection and self-promotion, then your society fragments and you end up in constant conflict worldwide. And the conflict will only rise. Believe it or not, and this is why I don't think anyone really writes on the topic of receiving, is no one relates that back to the capacity of receiving from God. But that's where it
Mm.
all starts. And it's such a fundamental, important thing that people are experts in receiving, not just from God, but receiving from one another. Um, that I think this is just why we miss it. Because I just don't think we think about it. And I think you and I could have some long, deep conversations about what it means to receive. Where did we lose the capacity to receive? And how does the inability to receive affect your view of gender, your view of everything is damaged when
Yeah.
we lose the capacity to receive, especially to receive from God.
When you first were talking, one of the statements that stood out to me was just the idea of when we go in to receive from God, as though it's an expectation. And I don't know if everyone really even believes that they can receive from God. Like
Right.
the constant question that people have is this God or is this just my own voice that's saying?
Mhm.
And and they don't walk into a prayer and think to themselves, God's going to speak to me right here. So I don't know
Right.
what you would say to that, but what do you think stops people from just walking into a relationship with a loving Father in heaven?
Well, I think one is they don't think it's a loving Father in heaven.
Yeah, that's true.
I
Yeah.
think I think you're only going to receive from someone that you love and trust, right?
Mm,
And so, I mean, at least from my from my own background in growing up in the church, is that God is mostly disappointed with me,
yeah.
and that my prayer life is more an act of trying to placate God or to appease God, so that God won't hurt me or my family, and that he'll provide for me. So it's much more of a transactional relationship. If I do this, if I have a quiet time, if I commit myself to these acts for God, then God will protect me and provide for me. There's very little love and trust involved in it. It's actually even not a lot of faith. It's more like idolatry, I would say. It's like the idea, like if I sacrifice, then the God will provide rain,
Right.
like at that level. And so
Right.
to go in and say, I want to receive from God, means that you're willing to open up yourself fully to God and say, I want to receive all that you have for me, is really throwing yourself into deep love. I mean, you have to be
Yeah.
fairly convinced of the love of God in order to do something like that.
I have a couple friends that I talked to over the past week, both of which want to start coaching businesses of their own, and both are deathly afraid in different ways. One way is got a fellow who's got a career that to give that up and to go in this other direction. And he knows it. Like he spent time with me in prayer and he knows what the Lord is telling him to do this, but he's so afraid to do it. And every time that he would go into prayer, it's as if he felt shame for not following what he knows he's already been told. And so to go back into prayer was not appealing to him.
Yeah.
And it's because there was this shame involved of thinking that, and so he's just been practicing recently, like, how can I just dwell in the love of God
Right.
instead of thinking that he's disappointed in me for not following what I know he's told me to do.
Yeah, and then that's a horrible cycle to be in. A lot of us are in it. A lot of us are raised in it. Like, it's right back to your first point. Why won't we receive from God? Well, God's inviting me into, I mean, that's how I think of it. God is inviting us
Yeah.
into things. And, as we see in the scriptures, he's inviting the Israelites into the new land, but they're afraid to go. And so
Yeah.
you get trapped in this, well, now we've let God down. So I can't go back to him and ask him, like, what do you want to tell me? Because he's already told me and I'm not going to do it. So you get in this trap. And I think a lot of people are in it. When you're in that situation, though, the question then to, I think, ask, you have to just step back in the receiving process and say, like, for your friend is like, okay, God's inviting me into something. That's my sense from God. How do you know it's from
Yeah.
God? Because I'm terrified to do it on my own, right? I mean, otherwise you would have invited yourself into it and you didn't.
Yeah.
So that's one way to know it's God. So God's inviting me into something and I'm afraid to do it. So and this is, I think, very much how the loving God would work. Then he wants you to ask, why am I afraid to receive an invitation from you? What is it that produces fear in me? You're inviting me into this. I'm afraid to do it. God wants you to know what do you believe about God that makes you afraid to receive the invitation, which is a deeper level question, right? Because I believe you're going to abandon me in the process. I believe you're going to invite me in and then leave. I mean, this
Yeah.
is exposing a wrong view of God. So the process of the invitation and why I wouldn't do it is all quite beautiful if you stay with it, right? If you stay,
Yeah.
don't just like, I disappointed him, I'm not going to do it. No, then just say, God, what is it that makes me afraid to follow you in this, right? That's a deeper
Yeah.
question. And that's the one the Lord really wants to get to.
When I see people who and have learned or have been taught at times that if you don't listen to God enough times, then it's as if he won't speak to you anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you think about that, but I think that some people, if they feel they are entrenched in sin or if they feel they haven't been listening, then God's voice turns off. That hasn't been my experience. And I don't know about you, but what's been yours?
No, I think the opposite. I feel like, I mean, I had a chance to go speak to a bunch of guys in rehab last weekend, and if so, here's people trying to come out of all kinds of addictions, and I think they'll tell you, and I'll tell you myself because I also had to do a year in rehab 12 years ago. It's in the places where you're in your darkest that he speaks the loudest.
Yeah.
Right? Because if he didn't, then God would only speak to good people, right? It would almost defeat the purpose of having a loving God. He's the
Yeah.
one that lifts us out of the slimy pit, right? He's the one that comes down and redeems us. As David said, where can I go from your spirit if I descend into hell? Yet you are there. And I said to those guys, I can remember being in states of intoxication when I could clearly hear the Lord's inviting me to sobriety. Well, like,
Yeah.
if I'm in sobriety, I don't really need his voice as much as I do when I'm not sober minded. And so, yeah, again, it almost goes back to the example of your first friend. It's like
Yeah.
if God invites you into something and you're like, walking with him and he invites you into something and you say no, it's not going to, he's going to abandon you. Then he comes to you and says, okay, ask me why you're afraid to receive from me. Right. And so if you're in a place of like, I can't pray anymore, I just can't pray anymore. I'm whatever's happening in my life. that's the time I think where the Lord is the most compassionate and the most with you. And when people are in
Yeah.
that state with me, I say like, let's just listen for any word, just any word at all. Don't just Lord, just, I'm lost. I can't hear from you. This is what I believe about you, that after a certain amount of time, you stop talking. What do you want me to know about that? And it's funny, listen to him speak to that question, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
fascinating. And then what that does is increases your willingness to follow him, right?
Hmm.
Realizing, wow, in my darkest place, he met me. How much more will he meet me when I'm, tight with him and connected with him?
Just this morning, I had a ex NFL football player that I prayed with, and there were moments where he couldn't hear, and moments when he could hear. And in the moments when he couldn't hear, it was either, Lord, what do you want me to know about the silence? Or we just like take it another direction.
Right, exactly.
And I don't know about for you, but like when you see someone that just really struggles to hear anything, uh, is there go-to things that you like to do or walk through, or can you share an example of
Yeah,
someone that was
yeah.
like that?
Well, yeah. So I also with a professional athlete,
Yeah.
former professional athlete. So the key is whenever, God can only move in truth, right? And so
Mm,
if the person won't truth tell,
yeah.
then God can't function in a lie, right? So when I'm talking to this former player, I wanted him to like let's just tell the Lord where you're most afraid. He goes, "Oh, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid." So it's like um, you can't talk to a person that won't truth tell. Because there's God can only move forward in what's true. So that's number one is like just
Yeah.
tell the truth, right? And so if God appears to be silent, then kind of like what you're saying is, Lord, is there anything that makes me afraid to hear from you? Is there anything that
Mhm.
prevents me from hearing or back to receiving all that you have for me? What would prevent me from that? Or are you saying things? A lot of times God is actually speaking, but they're afraid to say what it is because it's either not what they think or it scares them, right? So to say God doesn't speak is always going to be incorrect.
Mm.
So that because when we read through the scriptures, there's no real example of anyone hearing from God and not being able to figure it out, but there's lots of examples of people hearing from God and saying we don't want to do that. Lots of
Yeah.
examples. So most of the time, even in my own life, when I'm praying and I hear the Lord saying something, it's like, I don't think I can do that, or I don't really like that person. And so it's not that God's not speaking, it's me like not listening more is the thing. So it's
Yeah.
usually an area of fear or an area of unforgiveness. One of those two is usually the
Oh, okay.
blockade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a time in your life where you felt like you couldn't hear or there was a disconnect?
Yeah, and that's when I mean clearly in my life is when the Lord is inviting me into something or communicating something to me that either is too scary for me to say yes to, or I just don't want to do it. And
Yeah.
that creates the disconnect. The disconnect isn't on God's side, the disconnect is on my side.
Yeah.
There's never been a time when God disconnects from us, never. But there are times when I don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think I remember you telling an experience. I don't know if it was when you were overseas in Indonesia where you were so caught up in like doing your own thing. I don't know if like there was as much counseling because we just think that we know the
Right.
program, we know the
That's right.
way.
Yep. And you just
Yeah.
stop asking, you stop paying attention. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. All kinds of mistakes like that where I either think I've got it or, yeah, I don't want to ask. I don't want to hear the
Yeah.
direction it's going. Especially if it has something to do with like, you need to forgive this person. Well, I don't want to forgive them, that kind of thing. Or, yeah, you need to like confess your fear in this area, and I just don't want to deal with the fear. It's much more like that than God has disconnected from me. It's always the human disconnecting from God.
So is your go-to if you notice that you're disconnected, is it simply just to tell the truth and notice, like in question, you just ask yourself, okay, is there anyone that I'm not forgiving right now? Is that
Exactly.
the way you approach
Yep.
it?
Right. If God has ever seemed silent, it's always, Lord, what is it? What do I need to know about myself? Is there any place in my life where I'm afraid to receive from you? Is there any person in my life that I refuse to forgive? Is there any place in my life where I don't receive your forgiveness? That
Mhm.
happens too. A person feels unworthy.
Yeah.
So even before you start to pray with them, they're already kind of disconnected because they just feel like why would God talk to me? I'm unworthy. I'm sinful,
Yeah.
or I'm engaged in something, that's sinful, and they're afraid that God won't talk to them unless, they're pure, that kind of thing. It all comes back to the word receive. It's just God is constantly giving. It's that we're unwilling for whatever reason to receive what he's saying or what he's inviting us into. It all comes back to that idea. There's the verse in the New Testament that says, talks about wages and gifts, and it's an interesting verse. For the wages of sin is death. So if you want to work for something, if you're going to work for it, the result is death. But the gift of God is eternal life. So what God is trying to give to us is life. When we won't receive life, then we work on our own, and the result is death. So
Hmm.
it's like, stop working so hard and learn how to receive, because what you'll
Yeah.
receive is life. But if you're just going to work it, if you're just going to, do the best you can and work as hard as you can and be the best kind of person you can, it just results in separation.
That's exactly what this professional athlete said this. Well, I noticed this morning, it's like he's lived a life of um, pushing through things,
That's right.
you
Yep.
know,
Hmm.
and go, go, go. And the Lord kept inviting him to rest.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
I see people on one side that are, they need to be like, move, like go, because they're not moving. And then there's other people that they go so much and he's like, rest,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. There's that balance, right? And that's a good way to know whether it's God or not. If God is, if it's a go, if it's like you need to get into motion, then it's an invitation forward with God. Like,
Yeah.
come on, let's go, let's get up and go. But if it's you by yourself going, then a lot of times the invitation will be like, let's slow down, let's rest. You don't have to do all of this by yourself, right? You don't have to
Yeah.
do. And so it's a rest. And so again, that's the way that you understand God. The professional athlete I was praying with the same way. Like, I'm a hard worker. I know how to work through things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but you're falling apart. Your whole life's falling apart. Yeah, but I'm going to work through it. I'm going to figure it out. Yeah, but
Yeah.
he wants to help you through it. And and it's like, just receive, just receive. But he spent so much of his life, uh, you know, excelling in his mind on his own power. So it's very hard
Mhm.
for him to receive, and the pushing now doesn't work anymore. Like, he's pushed as hard
Yeah.
as he can. People are, and I've done this myself. They're asking God, they're praying like, God, give me breakthrough, give me breakthrough, give me breakthrough. But that's not really the prayer. The prayer is, let go, let go, let go. Don't break through, let go.
Mhm.
Right? Let go and let go and receive from God. Don't try and break through things. Let God walk you through things. You know,
It's so counterintuitive. And I feel
it
like
is.
that's how the Lord always is, so counterintuitive.
It is, because it's counter to this world system
Yeah.
that we're operating in, which is like, work hard and be the best and be an apex predator and all this kind of thing. It's like, it's just like that. That's back to the wages of separation is death. The wages of separation is more separation. That's what happens. If you're going to be
Yeah.
number one and push hard and be number one, you're going to keep separating from others, separating from yourself, and you're going to just end up separate.
Yeah.
But the gift of God is life, constant life. Brings life to you. It brings life to people around you.
Yeah. Well, just to kind of close us out, I know that we're going to do like a part two to this
Mhm.
later on down the road, just to walk through a process or just even showcase some step-by-step things that people might
Yeah.
do. But is there anything that you would just invite people into, or just anything that that God might say to you now that on this topic of receiving?
Yeah, I think the question always is what we're afraid of. To me, that's always the go-to question because fear is
Mm,
a valuable tool to point to things that hurt us, things we believe that are going to hurt us, actions we're going to take that are going to hurt us. So my prayer every day, first thing in the morning is, Lord, is there anything that I'm afraid of? Am I afraid of anything in my life right now? Because where the fear is the invitation to exchange some false belief for something that's true, right?
yeah,
So that's just what I would always pray, Lord. And then search, giving God permission to search. Just search me and reveal to me any place in me that's just not right with you or with myself or with the world. And just, yeah, let the Spirit of God search you and bring these things to your mind. And that just keeps the communication open, and
yeah.
then you can work from there because that fear will prevent you from receiving. And the fear will be pointed towards unforgiveness or wrong view of God or wrong view of yourself or others. So that's just my kind of go-to starting point with anybody.
I love that. Well, for those of you who want to learn more about Jamie, there's his website called Identity Exchange, and you can get coached there. There's awesome programs. I'm pretty sure I've bought every single one. They're all amazing.
Yeah, you're one
And
of our star people too.
just I love Jamie a lot, and I just know that you'll gain so much value by uh, just learning as much as you can. We all just can thank God because he's the one that's led Jamie on this path.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. That's right. It's all about
so
receiving. Let's
it's
talk
all
more
about
about
receiving.
this
So
morning.
we'll talk more later, everybody. But thank you for joining us here, and thank you, Jamie.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you found this helpful, please consider making a donation to support our mission of helping people like you learn how to listen and follow what God is calling you into. And to thank you for your donation, you'll actually get access to weekly live calls, a supportive community, and unique course materials to help you not only create more time, but to boldly follow through on what you know to be true about you. Just go to inherentidentity.com to learn more. We'll see you there.